Hi, you're watching India Today Global with me, Ishita Mitra. And the big news today is that Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Iran. And now Hamas and Iran both have said that they're going to avenge Haniyeh's death, while Israel is yet to comment on the situation. I have with me a defense and Middle East expert, Andrew Fox, joining me from United Kingdom, and we're going to unwrap how this incident unfolded in Iran's capital. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's first address the elephant in the room. How do you think Israel pulled off this attack, assuming that it was behind this attack, given the security situation in Iran?
Well, it would have been intelligence driven, and Hamas have made it really easy for Israel to find these leaders because they've been putting pictures of them visiting in Tehran all over social media for the last few days. And once you know exactly where someone is, it's quite easy to track them to where they're staying. And so that would have been laid on a plate in many ways for the Israelis.
And so you think that, Israeli could have pulled this operation?
Do I think that, absolutely. There's no question that Israel are behind this. I don't think anyone's denying that. The Israelis will keep quiet about it because they quite often do. This will have involved I'd be very surprised if they didn't have someone on the ground calling the strike in, looking at the accuracy of the round, looking at the kind of munition they used. I think it's very unlikely that there wasn't somebody in Iran feeding intelligence back to the Israelis. And so, that's not something they're going to go hugely public with.
Yeah, so you have raised a very important point that this could be an insider's job as well. So how do you think they could have pulled off this operation given somebody from inside was involved in that?
The way these things work is that you can use things like laser pointers to help you guide munitions in. So I'd imagine, first of all, there's leaks on the Iranian side. There will be people who've told that information to the Israelis. There will probably be some kind of special forces on the ground who will be laser pointing the targets and calling that strike in. And then, of course, there'll be the Israeli jets in the air to actually launch the round and have it hit on the objective. So it's a fairly well tried and proven way of doing this. And the US have this capability. The UK certainly do. I'd be surprised if India didn't. So this follows a pattern that we can recognize.
Okay. So now you have been covering West Asia for long. Let's understand this. What could be the implications for West Asia after this incident? And do you think Iran and Israel could go out an all-out war for this?
No, I don't think so. Any Iranian reaction is going to be bounded by their own capabilities, and they're not in any way near as technologically advanced as the Israelis are. So in a fight directly between Israel and Iran, there's only one winner there. It's always Israel. So that's why Iran has developed this proxy network around the Middle East.
Yeah.
If there's any escalation, that's where I expect it to come from.
Exactly. As you mentioned, there have been Iranian proxies which have been, having an exchange of fire with Israel. So what do you think could be the role of Houthis and Hezbollah from now onwards?
I mean, again, they're quite bounded with what they can do as well, because they've already been hitting Israel for the last 7 months with moderate success, certainly from Hezbollah's side in Lebanon.
Yeah.
They've fired 7,000 rockets into Israel. Israel have replied 14,500 airstrikes since 7th of October. So there's not really a huge place to go for them in terms of escalation because they're already at the limit of what they can realistically do, unless they decide to launch every missile they have at Israel, which will inevitably draw a response from the West, and that's the last thing Iran want. So they're very limited by what they can actually achieve here. So I'd be very surprised to see a huge level of escalation after this.
All right, and when we talk about the role of Israel's allies, what are we looking at about Washington's role in this? Do you think, US had prior information about this incident?
I'd be surprised if they didn't. I mean, SOCOM and the Israelis are very close to each other, the American Southern Command. The Yemen strike a couple of weekends ago, that was very clearly coordinated with the Americans. And it would be surprising if the Israelis didn't let their allies know that this at least was going to happen. And Israel is entirely reliant on its allies. It's really important for them to keep the Americans and the British and various other countries on side because they get a huge amount of arms, particularly from America, and so it's very much in Israel's interest to keep their allies sweet, as it were.
All right. So let's talk about the ongoing Gaza war. You know, it has been going on since October 7. How do you think this incident will affect it? Do you think it will lead to more escalations? Or do you think that now that Israel has eliminated the Hamas chief, it will now reduce its attacks on Gaza?
Tactically, I think it'll make very little difference. I mean, this is a strategic insult to Iran. It's a strategic embarrassment. It's sending a very clear message about their intentions towards Hamas. But the war in Gaza is going the way it's going. Israel have a very clear plan. They've swept through Gaza City. They've swept through Khan Yunis. They've swept through Rafah. And they're now in the process of dismantling as much Hamas infrastructure as they can. And you know, trying to raid when intelligence tells them that there's a target to strike. What really matters here is Sinwar on the ground in Gaza.
Yeah.
He's the one that's really calling the shots in this war. And as long as Sinwar is still alive and still safe, I suspect the war will carry on very much the way it has been.
Do you think he's the next target?
I think he is number one on the target list, but he's probably hiding in tunnels still.
Yeah.
You know, some of these tunnels still go down 14 floors. They're really deep.
Yeah.
He is almost certainly surrounded by hostages, Israeli hostages, so that makes striking him incredibly difficult. I'd be surprised if Israel were able to strike him at this point. But as we saw with Mohammed Deif a couple of weekends ago, you know, these guys make mistakes, and they've only got to make a mistake once, and then Israel can get them.
Exactly. You know, you mentioned hostages. So what we've seen so far is that they were making progress. Both the sides were making progress on hostage negotiations. How do you think now Ismail's death will impact those ceasefire negotiations?
It's a tough one because Hamas don't have a huge amount of reason to negotiate. You know, their strategy is very much to use the people of Gaza as their human sacrifice to make Israel's standing on the world stage damaged, you know, and they've done that very successfully through information warfare by spreading these false claims of genocide and starvation and all this kind of stuff that's very easily disproved, but a lot of people believe it. The hostages are really their only bargaining chip, and if Israel are determined to remove Hamas from power, then Hamas have no reason to negotiate with them because they can't be removed from power until the hostages are released. So it's a really tricky sort of paradox that we find ourselves in here. This strike, I don't think will make a huge amount of difference in those negotiations. The Hamas political leadership will go back to Doha. They'll find somebody else to take over, and the negotiations will continue. But I don't think Hamas is negotiating in good faith at this stage.
Exactly. You know, so coming back to the attack, this attack happened because Haniyeh was there to attend Iranian president's inauguration ceremony. So, you know, what kind of challenges will now come up for the newly elected president?
Well, he's got to work out if he's going to continue the strategy that Iran has been pushing for this long. I think the first thing they're going to have to make a decision on is whether they accelerate their nuclear program. There's a huge risk in doing that because that could then draw an international response, not just from Israel, but from the US as well. So he's got to work out, you know, how much risk he wants to take when it comes to making Iran a nuclear power. The next thing he's going to do is look at their strategy in the Middle East and see if it's working and if he wants to continue. And I suspect that he will, because this ring of proxies around Israel has been a very successful strategy. It's caused huge disruption. It's caused huge shipping issues with ships trying to go through the Suez Canal. It's putting huge pressure on Israel. It's making them expend ammunition, expend soldiers. So I think he'll be very much a continuity candidate, and we won't see much change in policy from Iran at this point.
All right. So, you know, my last question for you is that we've seen in the last 24 hours, two prominent leaders, one from Hezbollah and one from Hamas, have been killed. And, you know, a lot of strong reactions have come up from Arabic states. Do you think there could be an alliance of Arabic states against Israel in West Asia?
There's a wider geopolitical game being played here. So on one side, you have Iran and their allies and their proxies. On another side, you have the sort of Qatar, Turkey, parts of Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood axis. And then you have the kind of slightly more moderate Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Now, Saudi Arabia are having to play a slightly more neutral game. But certainly the UAE and the Bahrainis they're very much on board with the Abraham Accords, and they see Israel as certainly a prospective ally. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said that in Congress just last week, that he wants to advance this from being an Abraham Accords to an Abraham alliance and make it a bit more formal.
Exactly.
So whilst Arab countries might be upset with Israel, there are much bigger things at play here. And the last thing any Arab country wants is Iranian domination of the Middle East, which is what Iran wants.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for speaking to us. And we'll continue to bring you more updates on this. Stay tuned to India Today Global.
Thank you.